Top five, top five, top five.
Yeah, girl, you ready to do this? You ready to count this thing down? We're doing the top five, heard? Yeah, let's set it off with 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ranked Top 5 List of Stuff That Don't Matter. I'm your host, Tuong Law, reporting from my room, but also there's cameras all over right now recording me, and there's a helicopter around the house. There's a lot of drama going on, and I have a very exciting episode for you because there's a lot of pressure to make this documentary right for the Pod Cavern, and I have an ace team to talk about this topic. Vinny Francois, everyone. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tuong. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, you are an undercover journalist, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in hiding. I'm working on a project.
But you shouldn't be telling people you're an undercover
Well,
journalist.
you blew it first, so now it's over.
I'm sorry. I'm really bad at interrogations. I gave up everyone instantly.
Yeah. Like with that time you were an international spy, and you're like, I'm a spy.
Yeah, they're like, what's your name? I'm a spy. Damn it.
Yeah, that was your first response. It was a mistake.
Vinny, I'm so happy you are here back in the Pod Cavern. We haven't seen you in a while. Last time was what? What was last time we talked about? I don't even remember.
It was ranked top 5 fictional horses.
Was it it? Didn't we do another one after?
No.
Okay, great. Well, how can I trust you? I'm not sure. You are undercover.
This may be part of my undercover disguise. So.
Yeah, that's right. Vinny, can you introduce the next guest for me?
Absolutely. Our next guest is Howard Mitnick. Howard Mitnick, also an undercover journalist, but also mostly known as a wonderful podcaster and human being in general. Hey,
Welcome
Howard.
to the show, Howard.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you. I am a wonderful human being, and I'm very glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm very excited. This is the first time Howard and I have ever met, so I'm really, really excited to just, have a pleasant conversation and then argue a lot about this topic later.
There
and
will
maybe
be
not
lots of
friends.
arguing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Howard, can you introduce the last guest for me?
For sure. To my right in real space, the great Katie Pagnucco.
Hello.
Katie! Oh, everyone, this is very exciting. I've wanted Katie on Ranked for a very long time. Vinny has selfishly, as always, as Vinny does, kept her to himself. So,
As I will.
but I was able to reel Katie in, I don't know, was it like half a year ago when we talked about Mortal Kombat of all things?
Never forget. Was so honored.
Yeah. And you've been practicing your fatalities ever since, is that right?
Yes, and my animalities and babalities. I've got them all nailed down.
Okay, wow. Hopefully it doesn't come to that today.
We'll see when it comes to whittling the list.
That's right. I know we said we would argue with each other. I didn't think we'd babality each other.
No, you're a baby now, Tuong.
Documentaries. Okay, let's get into it. The reason why there is helicopters around the house right now is because we are filming a documentary in the podcast where we're documenting this episode as we speak and talking about documentary films specifically. I feel like we came up with this topic together eons ago.
Yes.
What drew people to this specific topic?
I love a documentary. I mean, that seems like a good enough reason to make a list when you're like automatically your brain starts filling with things. And I think we can easily get a very diverse list here of all these different brains together.
Yeah, I'm a pretty avid documentary film watcher. I'm sure there are people who watch more, but it's a genre of film I really enjoy, and I've watched them for many years. And yeah, as soon as that potential subject came up, I was like, oh yeah, I hope that's in the mix.
As my children would tell you, that's really the only thing that I watch anymore is reality television and documentaries. I have no interest in fiction,
is done.
fantasy. It's all dead to me.
Right. Only the real matters.
That's it. If it didn't happen, I'm not interested in it.
If it didn't happen, it didn't matter.
That's so interesting to me. And I also love a good documentary. But over the years, I would say I kind of strayed away from it. I was the opposite, Howard, where I'm just like, I don't want to know about the real world. It's too dark. Give me something that's going to make me happy or whatever. Or that's too fantastical that it can't be real, that kind of thing. So when someone finally picked this topic, I usually have like a list of like 20 that I send to people, and people just start whittling it down and stuff. And when you guys were like, let's do documentary films, I'm like, wow, I'm very excited, but I am very underprepared. So like super underprepared. And I feel like we had this topic, for 2 months now, just sitting here. And and I remember being like, yeah, let's put it all the way out so that I have time to watch documentaries. And I only started watching movies for this podcast like a week ago. But let me tell you,
wow.
I've done a lot of these episodes where we rank, let's say, like rom-coms or whatever. I do the research. I'm a big avid person to I'm going to do the work. So in the last week, I've watched, like 20 documentaries.
Nice.
I watched 3 today as I was working.
Whoa. Do you think that one of the 3 you watched today is going to be in the list?
Yes.
Whoa.
Which is
It's
crazy.
the best documentary I saw today and also the best documentary ever made.
That's right. It was an interesting thing because I feel as though with something as broad as, let's say, rom-coms, for example, there is a list out there that always kind of ends with like When Harry Met Sally, right? Where documentary films, I really underestimated the beast because there is just a zillion documentaries, and any list that exists out there are never the same.
Well, I watched every documentary ever made for this, so I really do feel like I'm prepared. And I do know, based on the criteria that you shared with us, I used that criteria very carefully. I metriced it out. And I know the best documentaries.
I find like a lot of are from like the past 20 years. Like, I don't know if that's just my millennial bias, but like when I thought about like my favorite documentaries and made my big list and then went to see like the year these things were made, either there's been a huge explosion or just maybe the bias and availability towards more recent ones.
I had a couple that were pre-2000 on my short list.
But it's definitely standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like,
Sure.
Like the best basketball players now are technically much
Standing
better
on
than
the shoulders of other basketball.
That's why they're so tall.
Yeah, in trench coats, yeah.
Like it's technical stuff, just and skills and understanding and receptiveness of the audience, and what you can do is built upon what comes before. So.
Right. Yeah. It's like trying to compare on a purely technical level, a recording from 2000 to an audio recording from the year like 1910.
Sure. Or like, for example, the doodles that I do so much better than Da Vinci, anything he did, just because it's centuries later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that though. Like the idea that like there is an explosion of documentaries now, but yes, I do agree that like the technology has brought us here to be able to do that. Like back in the day, the footage was always terrible, and how we pieced it together was just so messy. In an age where like a lot of things have become much more available to us and that we can remaster to high definition and piece it together digitally, like we've been seeing an enormous amount of stories out there that are really exciting. So let's talk about the ground rules of what we can nominate and what we can't.
Right.
I'll go first because originally I was like top 5 documentaries, easy. And then eventually I was like, no, we have to do top 5 documentary films because docu-series is a completely different beast right after that.
Absolutely. So many series. And some of these movies then get released as series and cut up and vice versa.
Yes.
So
I'm willing.
It can blur.
Yes, it can blur. And Howard, you brought up Point, and I'm sure it will come up and I might nominate such thing as well. But like there are things that technically are considered movies, but yes, we're split up into 5 to 6 parts, that kind of thing.
Well, here's how what I used as my sort of, cutting line. If a film was released as a film and then later on there were more films that came out that turned it into a series, I think that each of those films is an individual film and collectively they are a series, but I still would count that. Whereas if something is made to be released either serially or for someone to watch serially, I think that's a series.
I'm sure we can argue it out if it comes up.
Is that what we're here for?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There will be blood. There will be babies as well. Any other ground rules that we want to talk about here?
I have an injured neck, so please no one touch me in the neck.
Okay, yes, don't do that. I mean, you
Katie,
three are the
don't
only
pull out
ones
his spine.
physically in the room together. I wish someone would touch my neck. Laura, come here. I think we just get into it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, just like every episode of Ranked, we're going to go around 3 times, nominating 3 nominations each, making a master list of 12, and whittling that down to a top 5 documentary films list. Okay, here we go. My first nomination is recent. I watched it a week ago. This one really intrigued me, but I never gave it the time because it seemed a little too... I'm going to say the word young, even though I'm probably all of these people's ages in this documentary. But it has to do with a certain failed festival that happened. It is the Fire Festival, or just called Fire, F-Y-R-E. And I remember people talking about this a lot. And I used to go to music festivals, but I never went to the one that like the Fire Festival depicted, where it was just, I don't know, there's just a certain level of maybe like a frat boy, sorority girl type of party element to it where people are really going for it. Like I usually went to like a music festival that was like all rock or like a blues fest or something like that. It was a little bit more, I'm going to say tame, quote unquote, where Fire Festivals seem like this is for people who are young, ready to do a ton of drugs and alcohol and want to let loose. Mm-hmm. And when I learned about what this was, I was pretty interested, and I assume all of you watched it, right?
I've seen it.
I've seen it.
I know there were 2 Fire
I was
Festival
gonna say.
documentaries. I've seen the one that was on Netflix,
I've
which
seen
is
both.
a subscription I
Okay.
pay for.
Is there a big difference between the two, Vinny?
Yeah, the Netflix one is much better.
Okay, that's the one I'm nominating.
The Netflix one is the one with that great guy with the New York accent
Yes.
who talks about how he would do anything.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Oh, it's explicit. I think
Yeah,
it's
it's pretty
blowjobs,
explicit. Yeah, but yeah, the Netflix one has access to all of the principles involved, so it's definitely got the better story.
For the people at home who don't know, so Fire Festival was kind of made up by Ja Rule and Billy McFarland. The Ja Rule element of this always blows my mind.
Yeah.
But kind of like a long story short is these 2 entrepreneurs really wanted to create this festival, and like this huge event of a festival. It was going to be on an island. It was going to be like nothing we've ever seen before. It was going to be put together at a very high cost as well, but there was going to be so many perks that we've never seen in a festival before. It was supposed to be like the next level Burning Man, Woodstock kind of thing, where there was like, you know, Instagram models everywhere. You can get your own like yurt that like live on the beach. You got to like, party with models, and like it was just supposed to be an insane thing. Tickets were just stupid amount of money. And when it came time for the festival to happen, it was not any of those things, and a complete train wreck. And one of the co-founders ended up going to jail for it because it was fraud or something. Like a lot
fraud.
of things.
A little bit light fraud.
A little bit of fraud.
fraud.
He took a lot of money from people and conned a lot of people into buying into this idea that it was going to be the best festival ever. And then I'm surprised nobody died, honestly.
Yeah, pretty rough. I for me, the image that comes to mind when I think about the Fire Festival doc is the sandwiches they were given.
The food.
Oh my God. It's like, for me, it's the whatever storm tents that they had.
Yes, yeah.
And how it was supposed to be like this luxury kind of space they get to stay on the beach, but it was just like, there's no plumbing in the area. They were all sleeping on wet mattresses because it stormed the night before. And people couldn't even fly out of the island because they were stuck there. And it's bad news.
And the best thing about it is all the people who ended up getting screwed were sort of, selfish, self-involved influencers. And so screw them. So
There's definitely a lot of
Some shade and
Schadenfreude, for sure.
Oh, yeah. So that's my first nomination. Let's go for
good one.
Vinny.
All right. Well, I'm gonna work backwards chronologically with my picks. So I'm gonna start with the most recent one on my list of 3, and that would be 2019 movie. It's out also on Netflix called Tread. which Katie has seen.
I knew you'd pick Tread.
I've never heard of it.
No, very few have. I don't know, Howard, have you seen this? Tread. The short version of this, this is a true story, and it's the documentary of this story, and the footage that they've got is awesome. This takes place in a small town of Colorado. A local welder has beef with his neighbors, and he's in the wrong, and the town has taken the neighbor's side. So it's like a zoning business. Like, he runs a welding shop. He takes issue with what his neighbors are doing, construction and like building on his property or violating some building codes. And the city's like, no, you're in the wrong, buddy. Like, they are allowed to do the project that they're working on. And so this guy decides, I'm going to take matters into my own hand. And because he's an industrial welder with this like huge property, in his garage over the course of several months, he builds a rampage vehicle with treads, bulldozer parts, cameras, reinforced against bombs and riot squad. And he just bulldozes as much of the town as he can.
What?
And it's incredible.
Wow.
It's just this amazing story of this one man's rage against the machine.
Finally.
Yeah. Like, he tried to fight the law. Unfortunately for him, the law still won.
Still
Spoilers. But it's just, even knowing all this, and I watched the trailer, but I'm like, I can't wait to see this. And it sets it up so lovely. And I'm like, oh, please pay off this movie. Please pay off this movie with footage of it. And oh, yes, they have lots of footage of this bulldozer.
Was anyone seriously injured?
I don't believe anyone was seriously injured. It's a very slow machine.
Yeah, it looks like a slow machine. It looks like something from Mad Max, to be honest.
Yes.
with you.
Absolutely looks like something from homemade Mad Max.
Yeah, he like makes his own at-home tank.
Yeah, basically it's reinforced on all four sides. It has like its own engine, its own air system, it's amazing.
Have you ever seen the Grizzly Project?
Yes.
That's another guy who has his own. This guy it's a documentary. I don't think it's the greatest documentary ever. Sorry.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you because that's going to be on my list.
Oh, so sorry. Okay.
Wow.
But it's very similar.
I love it. I love that kind of story.
Vinny has a type.
I do
Yeah,
absolutely
I can
have a
see
type.
it now.
We'll get into
The
that in
rampage
a little
type.
bit.
Okay, sorry about spoiling that.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah, that's great. I'm looking at it and I'm picturing like someone coming like on top of it and, playing a guitar on fire, just like
Yes,
a Mad Max.
absolutely.
Like, oh,
It's the only way that movie could have been improved.
Exactly. All right, Tread, 2019's Tread. Katie, what do you have?
Oh my gosh. All these picks have been so fun, and I'm now
got a
regretting
very serious-
picking depressing ones.
Yeah,
Let's have
good.
fun with it. I will pick a 2018 documentary called Three Identical Strangers. Are any of you familiar with this doc? It's a pretty
I have
famous
seen
one.
it.
I
Okay.
have seen it.
I've
Okay.
heard about it. It was on the list. I never got to it. So
Okay.
please feel free to explain it. Yes.
Okay, great. So it's a great story. I think that if there's a pattern amongst my picks, I love a great story and I love sort of an incidental doc reveal where it's like some really cool twist happens that sort of was not planned for, that sort of changes the story. So basically it's a story of these three identical twins, triplets, who were separated at birth and had no idea that they were part of triplets and were each put into a different adoptive home. And the story has an amazing start where one of the triplets shows up at college the first day and everyone starts calling him by a different name because he looks identical to this other guy. And so someone figures out, like, you have the same birthday, you look identical to him, but you're not him, you must be his twin. And so they go out to meet each other and they show the picture of them meeting and they're like a mirror images. Same hairdo, same nose, same teeth, like unbelievable matching. And so they're super psyched. They had no idea they had a twin. They're comparing notes about their history and they have so much in common, except different sort of backgrounds in terms of how they were raised. And so they have this news story and then this guy watching is like, holy shit, I'm like looking into a mirror. I must be the third. And so they all get together and they have like the greatest time. They're on the Donahue show. They get incidentally cast in a Madonna movie. They just have this awesome time. They start a restaurant and it all is so happy-go-lucky, right? But then they start asking, like, why were we separated at birth? Because all the parents were like, we would have taken all three. We didn't know they were part of triplets. We wouldn't have separated them. And the truth is this adoption agency had separated them and not told the families that it was for a psychology project. So each of the triplets were put into a different home of different economic background. One sort of a poorer family, one a middle-class family, one an upper-class family. And they were studied unbeknownst to the families or them throughout their lives to see how they turned out, to sort of look at nature versus nurture. And so this really fucks them up. And one of them ends up committing suicide. It was really super sad.
That's really cool in the movie where like you just see like they're just interviewing two of them, and it just becomes heavier and heavier. That like, where's the third guy? He's not being interviewed.
And he was the most gregarious one too. Anyway, so it's very sort of sad, and it reveals like there's a bunch of twins from the same adoption agency, twins and triplets that were separated at birth, that sort of discover each other through this story. And a lot of them have sort of sad parts to it, because even though they didn't know that they were being pulled apart from a twin their whole life, there seemed to be this sort of trend of sadness and depression that seemed to trickle through. Anyway, let's laugh about that.
I'm sold. I want to watch
It's a great story.
Wow. It sounds good, even though I know is it a twist? Like, do you know that the third dies like pretty late on into the documentary?
Well, like Howard said, yes, but like Howard said, it's kind of obvious something happened, unless he just refused to be part of it. You just see the two the whole time, and the reveal that there was sort of this shady backstory is kind of comes in a third into the movie. But I'd still watch it. It's a pretty great story. Oh yeah, very sad.
Yeah, if nothing else, this week of documentaries has made me like documentaries again, like in a big way. I'm like, maybe I should be doing this more often. Although, like, I will say back to back, like, let's say murder
you don't
documentaries
have to watch 3 a day.
is a lot.
It can be heavy. It can be heavy.
It could be heavy. It's like, wow, real life is a lot. Howard, what do you got? First nomination.
So I still haven't settled on the ones I'm going to do. So I'm going to just choose the one that I know is my favorite. Or rather, let me correct myself, is the best documentary.
Whoa. Wow. Coming in hot.
Yeah. Well, I told you, I used the science.
He's watched all of them.
Yeah. The film is called Sherman's March, and it came out in 1985. It is created solely by a documentary filmmaker who was a professor at Harvard of documentary film. His name is Ross McElwee. And I saw this movie in the late 80s when I was probably 16 years old. And it blew my head off of my body. And I've come back to it maybe once every, 10 years or so, and I watch it again. And every single time it reveals more and more genius. So the premise of this film, and I have to say right away that the premise of the film has nothing to do with what the film is actually about. Ooh. The premise of the film is he got a grant to make a documentary film about General Tecumseh Sherman, the Union general in the Civil War, his march through the South that ended the Civil War, where he just basically burned, destroyed, pillaged, and raped everything until he just pushed the South into the sea. And he then went on to become infamous, and he became like the punching bag for both the North and the South. And so he's going to make this documentary. He lives in Boston, but he is from the South. He's from North Carolina, and he goes to the South. Oh, so sorry. Let me just. So the basic thing is, it has nothing to do with that. It's basically about him just making a film about all these women that he's falling in love with. So this is shot in the early 1980s, and it's shot with a 16 millimeter camera and a Niagara recorder and a microphone. He does this himself. So he just lives his whole life with this camera and this microphone on. And everyone gets used to this camera and microphone. Now, this is before iPhones. So he's got to worry about the light exposure and the sound. He becomes an expert, and people are not used to, now people are used to iPhones and video. So he develops these incredibly personal relationships with all of these different people. And no one knew how to be in that kind of a personal way with someone with a camera. The amazing thing about this story is he starts it off, and it's like an old style documentary, and it's like a map of the South during the Civil War. And it's like this man with a very, stentorial savage, General Tecumseh Sherman. And then you see the arrows going on the map, like old style. And then you hear Ross McElwee, who's got this annoying sort of North Carolina shoe voice. And he's like, well, thanks a lot. That's great. And then you see him, he's just shooting a static shot of himself. His girlfriend just dumped him, and he's going to go south, and he just keeps meeting all of these incredibly strange, women, and it's just like the male gaze for 2.5 hours. And he's just falling in love with one woman after another, and just keeps like, oh God, I guess I got to work on this documentary. And he has this like hilarious, like 1 minute about Sherman and then back to his girls. It's funny, it's wise. His use of the technology is incredible. How it's all about 1980 in America. So it's like nuclear Armageddon anxiety, fundamentalists in the South, all of these proper sort of old Southern styles. It's just gorgeous. Oh, obsession with Burt Reynolds. And he ends up meeting a Burt Reynolds lookalike. It's just crazy and it's great and I love it and I would recommend it to everyone.
Wow. A very, very strong sell of that one.
I am so fascinated, but I love the idea that it's not about the thing that he was supposed to do. Like, that's
about
so
something
great.
vastly different.
Wow.
Yeah, it sounds like a time capsule.
It is when you watch, especially look, I mean, I'm 50. I'm an old man. It's so beautiful to see that world, and the film and the quality of the film. And it's so personal. So he's like talking, he sets up the camera, he talks directly to it. Everyone's talking directly to him about really sort of like personal things. It's beautiful. It's hilarious. And it is kind of nostalgia porn a little bit.
You got me. You got me. You got me in
Let's
nostalgia
pause
porn.
to watch it.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Let's move on to the second round. Amazing first round. Amazing. This list is going to be very interesting. I think I'm going to go with. Gosh, I'm not sure. We haven't even got to like the heavy stuff yet, and I'm like, do I want to do that in this show? I'm not sure. It's so hard. I'm going to go with one that I saw yesterday, and it is. I like a good sports documentary. I'm not a big sports guy.
Me too.
Which is interesting. Like I like play sports kind of for fun, but I don't follow sports very closely all the time. Like I don't have a team that I'm rooting for, but I enjoy doing them. But something about the sports documentary and seeing like real athletes push themselves to a limit that I could never reach is phenomenal to me. And no sport for me is more interesting to watch for a documentary than someone who's rock climbing.
Oh, yes.
Oh, here we go.
But maybe it's not the one you think it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Well, it's one of two that
It's one of two. Okay, so like for me, if you were to really kind of like put the metaphor of climb every mountain, that's what everyone's trying to do. And then you literally see someone climb a mountain and see how fucking hard that is and how many years of work and just beating up their bodies, injuring themselves, putting themselves in just ridiculous danger. It is so fascinating to watch. Now, there is like obviously two, I think, that you can pit against each other for the best documentary film. One of them actually won best documentary for the Oscars, I think. But I'm not going to say that one. I'm going to be a little contrarian and choose the other one. The one I'm choosing is called The Dawn Wall.
Yes.
And I saw both back to back, which is a great double feature because they kind of feature the same guy, Tommy Caldwell, who is like a legend in the sport. And his story is fascinating. I mean, watch the documentary for sure. But long story short, he was kidnapped when he was rock climbing one time in a foreign country. He got his finger chopped off. He was a rock climber his entire life. So chopping off your pointer finger is a big deal because you use that a lot in rock climbing. And he's still able to persevere and try to climb the tallest and most difficult climb ever, which is the Dawn Wall, which is on El Capitan, which is like a huge fucking mountain, like cliff face, and nobody's ever done it before. And when you're watching the documentary, it's fascinating because they tell you a lot about the process and the work that's getting involved and how he brings somebody in, and you're watching them fail multiple times. It's called a free ascent. So essentially he is not using any tools. Him and his partner aren't using any tools to help him with the climb. The only tools that they're using is to help them not die. So a rope and a belay, that kind of thing.
They're pegged into the wall. Yeah.
That's right. And you're watching this thing, and these guys are literally living on like the cliff side of the mountain for like 19 days. So you're seeing like this cot that they created off the side, and you're seeing like ice pellets fall from the top of the mountain, like windstorms, and like they're explaining how you have to climb in the winter where it's already cold because that gives you that much more friction to be able to climb the rock. So it's a very fascinating story. Yeah, 3,000 feet up high, like that is a ridiculous amount of anything to climb. I can barely climb my couch. Like it's so hard. You guys saw it then, right?
Yeah, great pick. I mean, when I think of that, I completely relate to loving a sports doc. There's a lot of sports doc series that obviously would be excluded from this, but I love them too, despite the fact that I do not do sports. But I think that makes my fascination with this ability to strive against constant failure that I just find so fascinating. When I think of that movie, I think of that scene where I think it's his partner, not Tommy himself, who's trying
Kevin.
to make this one really hard lateral move. And I don't know how many times he tries it, but it's ridiculous. It's over several days he's trying to make it to continue with the climb. And it's unbelievable to think of trying that many times at something so hard and not quitting.
Yeah.
Morons. Morons.
Fools.
When we come talk about morons of rock climbing, it has to be the other movie that you weren't talking about, which has got to be Free Solo.
Yes, that was the other one. I mean, I was saving it in case someone else wanted to say it, but I feel as though, if anything, there will be only one rock climbing nomination tonight.
Yeah. Like, well, I mean, yeah, they're twin movies in a way because, yeah, it does feature some of the same people. But Free Solo is about solo climbing untethered to anything.
Yes.
And, like, the opening of that movie is him having a CAT scan showing that the fear part of his brain is missing.
And he's also climbing El Capitan, like
Yes,
in that movie too.
a different part of the wall, yeah, absolutely.
And, well, I'm going to use quotes because it deserves it. The easier part of the wall.
Calling him out.
Yeah. But it's like, that one is like you fall and you die, which is very crazy to think. And where this one, like that one was like all about like mastery of the moves, like very specific. You got to be like robotic in the way that you're doing it. You're perfecting it to a T. This one is like breaking new ground. Nobody's ever climbed this wall or tried to. And that's where it was like very fascinating because they said it was impossible.
He's got a crazy backstory. Like you said, like the thumb, but then also the being kidnapped in another country.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing is just a wild, wild story. And I'm also going to name drop one more mountaineering documentary, which is 14 Peaks.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
This one guy's quest to climb the 14 tallest mountains in the world in one calendar year. It's really cool.
Insane.
It's an amazing
And
feat.
despite the fact that his goal's nearly impossible, I won't say whether or not he achieves it, he also stops to save a lot of people.
Lives, yeah. He's like trying to climb all these, and then people get stuck on these mountains. He's like, all right, I got to put my mission on hold. I got to go save a whole bunch of it happens several times in the movie.
Try hard.
Howard's like, no, I'm not doing that.
Not enough male gaze for
We'll
Howard.
talk. I'll save it for later.
You save it for labor. Save it for labor?
Save her for labor.
Save her for flavor. Okay. Vinny, what do you got?
All right. Well, I mean, it's been spoiled already, so I might as well just go with
Yeah.
it. It's going to be Project Grizzly from 1996. It's a wild, wild movie. It's also freely available on NFB, so you don't have to check out Netflix. It's a Canadian-made movie about a Canadian, and it's about this one guy, Troy Hurtubise, who loves grizzly bears. He wants nothing more than to learn about them and like become like a biologist who knows everything about bears, and he wants to spend time with grizzly bears. But he also knows that they are lethal animals. They are killing machines. You can't run. You can't swim. There's no tree you can climb that will make you safe from a grizzly bear. They have claws that will eviscerate you with the blink of an eye. So a grizzly bear is no mean animal to kind of want to hang out with. So what does he do? He starts Project Grizzly. And Project Grizzly is his quest to build a grizzly bear proof suit so that he can hang out with and study grizzly bears. And this guy, he has a passion, an unparalleled. He pours all of his life savings into this. He has no previous engineering skills. Like his prototypes are like a football chest protector, a helmet, and some padding, hockey pants. And he's like, all right, hit me with this baseball bat and I'm going to see if I can feel it. And the testing that he does, and like his suits just get more and more wild. And you meet his like entourage who are supporting him and building things. And these are all characters from like rural Canada.
It really feels like FUBAR.
If FUBAR was a mockumentary, which is about two rural dudes having a great time and being goofs, these are real people who are, feels like, oh yeah, we're gonna mess around and make a grizzly, but they are deadly, unironically serious about it. And it is amazing.
I think I've discerned the trend in Vinny's picks.
Yes.
Angry man builds something crazy instead of going to therapy. Is that the trend?
That is the trend. Yeah, absolutely.
I actually haven't seen that one, despite loving grizzly bears.
Yeah, no, I don't think we've watched it yet.
And that's another one that has a twin movie. Grizzly Man. There's
yes,
another,
it does. Yes,
yeah.
the Werner Herzog.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also amazing, and that guy could have definitely used the Grizzly Project.
He absolutely could have used the suit.
And that documentary does have the huge benefit of Werner Herzog himself.
Yes, I mean, that's a huge benefit. Yeah. So yeah, it's a Canadian classic from 1996. Watch it free on the NFB.
Incredible. Katie, you love grizzlies. Would you take part in Project Grizzly?
I think I need more than a suit. The bear would have to be tranked.
Tranked? Just a little
would
bit?
have to be.
Unconscious, yeah.
Yes, but I do dream of hugging a bear, you know.
A real bear.
Oh, it would be lovely.
Even a brown bear?
It doesn't have to be a grizzly, though. It can
Yeah,
be...
just no.
Koala.
Yeah,
Teddy.
start small. Katie, what do you have? Second nomination.
Oh man, I'm going to. This is wild. This is wild and very not like me. But I am changing a pick.
I'm considering changing a pick that I hadn't even thought of until what you just said. It reminded me of another.
It's the power of ranked. We always change decisions last minute.
Yeah.
It was on my list, but it just wasn't ranked this high. But in the spirit of fun,
yes,
I'm going to nominate 2010's classic "Exit Through the Gift Shop." Where there's some nods and some head shakes.
I do not know this movie.
Okay.
Explain it, Katie.
All right. So Exit Through the Gift Shop is made by Banksy, who is a very famous street artist. And I think why I love this documentary, why I'm nominating it, is because it's a wild ride. It's a visual spectacle. And just, again, it's a case of, it's sort of a miracle for how this documentary is made. It's not what was initially intended. So the final film is made by Banksy, this famous street artist whose identity continues to be anonymous. But the focus of the film is this fascinating kind of nobody guy named Thierry Guetta, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct, who's a French immigrant to Los Angeles, who runs a vintage store, but it's kind of this guy who sort of gets obsessed with something, like finds a new interest and really obsesses. So in this movie, the thing that he gets interested in is street art, and he becomes super, super obsessed. And most of this documentary is the film of Thierry Guetta, where he is filming street artists making street art, and he helps them out, and he befriends Banksy to sort of help him carry out his street art. And what's really cool is the sort of twist in this one, because Katie loves the twist, is that he becomes a street artist. This guy who has no artistic background starts making this very, very derivative pop art, and has this gallery sort of show where he sells this art for like thousands and thousands of dollars to all these art collectors and famous people, and Banksy is just like losing his mind because he thinks this guy has no artistic eye. He's just completely sort of shows the commodification of street art rather than it being about something bigger, which Banksy's street art tends to be quite political. So it's sort of a fascinating story where most of the film is made by the main character as Thierry Guetta, but ultimately Banksy is sort of looking at this guy, looking back at him.
So it really plays with point of view,
totally.
You know, one person's story, but then you get the the other person's story, or the other person's point of view, so you're able to watch the film with that other sort of meta lens at the same time.
Because I think what happens is this Thierry guy tells Banksy he's making a street art movie, and then he shows Banksy his cut, and it's just like insane, like his art is. And Banksy's like, give me all the footage. He has all these tapes and tapes and tapes and tapes and tapes, and he actually puts together this final product.
That's so cool.
It's a good one.
Howard, second nomination.
Okay, so anyone who knows me knows that I'm never gonna not talk about a music documentary.
I figured at least one of these ones.
I've watched a million music documentaries. I love music documentaries. They're my favorite kind of documentary. I love music. I have had for a number of years a podcast about music where I talked weekly about it. So it's something that is definitely I'm very passionate about. And I'm not going to change my pick, but I'm just, before I say what my pick is, you were talking about Grizzly Project reminded me of Anvil, The Story of Anvil, which is a documentary film about an actual heavy metal band from the early 80s who were just like these two kind of not super smart Canadian dudes.
Speaking of FUBAR.
Exactly. That's why it made me think of that. But they're just they're Jewish, and the parents are Holocaust survivors, and they're just hopelessly still trying to be a heavy metal act, and they get booked in touring in Europe for nobody. It's great. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about. What I am going to talk about is
we were excited about it.
The great. Well, if someone wants to nominate it, is Metallica Some Kind of Monster?
Oh, yes. That was on my short list.
It's a really, so for anyone who hasn't seen this movie, I think the best way I could sell it is it's really good. You should watch it.
Yes, I agree.
It's basically a documentary film that was commissioned by Metallica, the band, in 1999 or 2000. And at the time, they were the most successful band in the world, the biggest heavy metal band, the biggest band in the world. And they commissioned these two film directors to make a film about them recording their next album. But before they got to starting to record the next album, the bassist of the band leaves, and they're in disarray. This is the period of time after grunge where heavy metal had lost its identity, and Napster and file sharing is just starting. And the drummer of Metallica decides that he's going to go after his own fans and sue his own fans for downloading streaming music. He was on the wrong side of history. And they hire a psychologist to do therapy for the band. And they go into the studio. And within a month or two, one of the two main guys in the band, the singer, guitarist, and the king of mean metal growling. Well, not truly, actually, because there's a lot of real super growlers. But anyway, James Hetfield goes into rehab, so the movie shuts down because it's very tense and it's very awkward. He comes back, and he only wants to record for 4 hours a day. And he's got all these rules, and there's so much anger, and there's so much hostility. And it is amazing.
Yes.
We learn how crazy all of these different people are. The psychotherapist starts writing the songs with these guys. Wow. There's all this animosity from Bob Rock, who's the producer of their biggest albums, who wants to be their new bassist. And he desperately wants to be the bassist. And you're watching this happen, and they do not want him to be the bassist. And they hire a new bassist. And you just see this band come through this crucible and crisis and, whatever. I actually don't like Metallica. I don't like the music they make. It's hard for me to even sit and watch that movie because the music of it is so bad. But it is
fascinating to me.
It is an incredible document about a creative institution trying to recreate. It's like trying to rebuild an airplane while it's flying.
Yes.
Yep.
It's wonderful.
It's amazing. I mean, the album that comes out of that is generally recognized to be their worst album.
Is that true? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not
Same
a
Taylor.
Metallica fan either. I recognize some songs. So like the idea of a Metallica documentary, not that interesting, but I think I know you sold me on this.
No, it's amazing.
It's a must watch.
Yeah, it's on my short list too.
Wow.
It's the access they have, and you got to give the band credit because a lot of bands I think wouldn't have been that raw on camera.
Especially in that genre.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where it's
all
like
machismo.
super macho. And they're really vulnerable, and they're struggling with the vulnerable. That's what's so great about it is that, like, even while they're being vulnerable, they're battling that same machismo, you know?
There's a vulnerability that you, even in the documentary genre, you don't see very often.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, that's fantastic. Let's go into the final round.
It
is very difficult in my head what to pick. I think I'm coming in with far different picks than what I originally was going to set out to. This is very difficult. I'm not sure if you guys are struggling too, because I feel like there's a lot of documentaries out there that are very politically charged, and they make you think about the world, and they are really good for critical thinking. Are they the documentaries I love the most? Arguably not. I feel like I should watch them because they will make me maybe a better person for watching them. And they do, but I always gravitate towards the weird stories or like the triumphs of the world. And I feel as though that's where it's taking me tonight, which is insane because I was not going that way earlier. My next nomination is a bit of a strange one, but I love the story that it's unlike something I've never really thought about in the world. The documentary is called Sour Grapes. It's a 2016 movie. Yes, finally one that you haven't seen. Which makes it, I guess, harder to sell on you later when we know. But I'll talk about it a bit. Okay, so basically you have this guy named Rudy who is a rich Indonesian wine collector. And he's obsessed with Burgundy, or for Burgundy, like that part of France. And he is the wine connoisseur. Like, he can taste hundreds and thousands of wine, and he can tell you exactly what like year it came from and what kind of wine it is. And you see that in the documentary. And also in this documentary is something that I've never really paid attention to, is how big the wine culture is if you really dive into it. Like the way people talk about wine, it's definitely hoity-toity, but these people exist out there. And like Rudy was the guy. Like he was the guy that everyone's like, this guy is the guy. He's like the legend. He's like the future of wine, basically. And like people were hiring him to do all these wine tastings and whatnot and all that stuff. Where the things get interesting for him is, I love a turn into evil, and that's what this guy became. So you have this guy who everybody revered. He's a nice guy. He's very popular, energetic. People respect the hell out of him. They want to be his friend. They love him. And this guy takes advantage of all of that. And because he has this mega palate, he is able to basically create fake wine. So he takes people's like empty bottles of these like tens of $1,000s of wine, like it'd be like this very expensive bottle that goes on auction, but he knows what it tastes like. So he'll try to concoct and like do like alchemy on his own to like try to make it taste as similar as possible. And then he forges his own labels and then sells it for tens of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Which is crazy. Yeah. And he was getting away with it for a very long time. And he had this wine cellar that was huge, like just massive. So he'd use his own kind of like, so say we're like sharing a bottle of wine, and these guys, when they do it, it's like you pour a tiny little glass, you shake it, and you're like, ooh, yummy, yummy, like whatever. And then you put the bottle away. For him, he'd use those bottles, fill it up to the top using whatever concoction he does, and then he'd resell it to the auctioneers, and then he'd make a shit ton of money off of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you like movies about fraud?
I love it. I love it. I love a good... well, I say I love it because I would hate to be this guy's friend. I hate when people like, you know, it's a classic like, I thought you were a good person, but...
I wonder, like, did you get a sense for what his motivation was? Was it just about the money? Was it just sort of like an ego trip to see if he could get away with it?
Yeah, I think, well, he was also in cahoots with his family, too, that were from Indonesia. So it was just like he was sent to, I think, America for a while to like do this. And then his family from Indonesia was all part of this con as well with him. So it was just, I'm not sure exactly what it was. Like he could have just done nothing for the rest of his life and he would have made thousands of millions of dollars. But I think it's one of those cases where it's like you flew so close to the sun, but you want to like find out what else, like how high can you actually go here without getting caught? And I think that's what happened to him. He ended up in prison for it, obviously. So
Wow.
Yeah.
Unreal.
It was great.
Sour Grapes.
Yeah, Sour Grapes. I recommend. It's a very interesting story. If not just to hear people talk about wine, because like I said, it is a insane thing that people are able to really discern the grapes of 1976 to like what? How did you do that?
It's like cars to me. I don't know how people look at a car from behind and they know from the shape of the hubcap, this 1927, whatever.
Nope. That's beyond me. Vinny, final nomination.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Well, my final nomination is not about success. We've talked about triumph and motive. Mine is about failure.
Ooh.
Mine is about an impossible task. And I love people who set impossible tasks. I used to run a scavenger hunt here in Montreal, and I called it Impossible Montreal because it was by design impossible to complete. And this documentary is about someone who has that same kind of fire in them. And it's about this guy, Gary Cantrell, whose nickname is Lazarus Lake. He lives in Tennessee, and he lives very near a prison where the assassin of Martin Luther King was being kept. And this prisoner made an escape into the heavily wooded areas of those mountains where this prison was. It's very isolated, very rural, in the middle of nowhere, but didn't get very far. He only got 12 miles from the prison before getting caught. And the guy who lived in that area, Gary Cantrell, he's like, I could have gotten at least 100 miles away. And he was an ultra marathoner.
Oh, I know where this is going.
And so this movie is the Barkley Marathons, named after Cantrell's neighbor, I think is Brad Barkley? Hang on, I've got it right. Barry Barkley. So the Barkley Marathons are run by this guy and his partner, Carl Henn, whose nickname is Raw Dog. And so every year, in the first year was, I believe, 1986. So in 1986, they started this 50-mile marathon, 5 10-mile laps up and down a mountain, set by Gary Cantrell, and done in a completely arbitrary way. It was designed explicitly to be unfinishable. The first person to finish was in 1988, in the third edition of it. There have only ever been 10 finishers of this race since then. You have to complete, the short race is 3 laps of 20 miles now, and the full race is 5 laps of 20 miles. And what's great about it is that it's impossible to do, but also it's not meant to be like this huge like corporate thing. It's just these 2 guys who run it. They change the course every year according to their whims to make it more difficult or less difficult. Only the first 40 people who show up that morning are allowed to sign up. Registration fee is $1.60 plus whatever item the town needs. So it can be a bunch of white t-shirts, or maybe they need some chairs for some town thing. And you have to, if it's your first time doing it, you have to bring a license plate from your state or province or country so they can put it up on their wall, because people around the world come here.
That makes sense.
That makes sense, right? It's perfectly whimsical. Mm-hmm. It is also just a wild idea, and this guy is a character. Everybody who enters is a character, and the people who there's one person who's finished it multiple times. It's wild. And yeah, little things like he always gives, you get 40 numbered bibs as a runner in this race. He always gives number 1 to the person he thinks is least likely to finish even one lap. So if you have that, you're not looking good. Oh yeah, he calls it the human sacrifice. So it's just this whole wild idea of an endeavor that is by design meant to test the limits of humanity, of challenging people to do things they know they probably cannot do, but maybe they can, and pushing them to their limits, while also just being purely for fun, but with a sense of mischief to it. All of the things that I really, really love. And so it's called the Barkley Marathons. It's amazing.
You're saying we should sign up for this. This is something that this group
I would
should
say
do.
just watch it. I feel like you should just watch it.
Okay. I have an extra license plate ready to go in my corner.
Perfect.
That's great. Katie, final nomination.
Gosh. Yeah. I feel like so much pressure to like pick a good nominee. I mean, we've heard a lot of big movies tonight, folks. A lot of classics. I'm going to pick the documentary that never wavered from my list. It was the first one I thought of. It's one that I don't think is super famous, although it was quite critically acclaimed when it came out. And it made me cry like no other doc has. And I come back to it frequently because I think it's about something bigger than what it's ostensibly about, now that I've built it up. This nominee is Last Train Home, which came out in 2009, was actually filmed by a Canadian documentarian. So this film is sort of meant to cover this phenomenon where every spring 130 million migrant workers in China travel for the New Year's holiday. And the coverage of this event is insane. An incomprehensible number of people piling at train stations, pushing and shoving with no space, trying to get home, because for most of them, it's the only time they ever go home. So they work in these factories 1,000 miles from where they live, and they work crazy jobs and work really, really insanely hard for very little money, send all the money home, and then they get to go home once a year, if they do. And so it's sort of a large sort of story, but I think what's really amazing is that it distills it down by focusing on one family over several years. And so there's this couple, this middle-aged couple, who are working in a garment factory, and they go home once a year. And they've been doing this for 15 years. They have a 16-year-old daughter and a younger son. So they left their daughter when they were a baby. So this daughter doesn't really know her parents. She sees them 2 weeks a year. They don't really get to talk very much. And she's very sort of detached from them. And so when the parents come home, you get to see them sort of trying to get tickets, trying to go home, and you see the family together. The two kids are being raised by a grandparent. And it's the parents really want to be there, be with the kids that they love so much. And the kids feel like these are strangers to them, basically. And so it's this really sort of tense situation. And so both of the parents grew up on farms, very, very poor. And they made this choice to work in these garment factories to raise money so that their kids could hopefully have a better future. What's really, really heartbreaking, and this is again the twist, is that about a year into the documentary, the teenage daughter quits school and goes to work in a garment factory herself. And when you see the parents sort of find out, they've given up their lives, they work to the bone, and they've given up their family and seen their kids being raised to hopefully pay for college for their kids. And now their daughter is like, screw that. I don't want to live on this farm anymore. I want to make my own money. I'll find my own way out. So it's really, really heartbreaking. You see these parents sort of try to continue with this life they chose long ago. And this daughter sort of working through all these horrible, horrible jobs herself. And there's a lot of sort of family tension and fighting, and sort of the visuals are really hard to watch. And in the end, for me, the most heartbreaking part, the wife of the couple decides to quit and go back home to sort of hope that their son, with her being home, can be raised so that he doesn't sort of rebel in the same way. So then the husband is sort of left alone on the other side of the country, working this really, really, really hard job. It's a documentary that tells a story mostly through visuals. Like there is talking, but the story is told through these pictures of what these lives are like. And it's sort of about the universality of parents wanting a better future for their kids, but also the rights of kids to sort of pick their own path and make their own mistakes. And yeah, I really recommend it. It's a really beautiful film.
Sounds heavy.
That was a great description. That was a really great description.
I know.
It is good, though. I like that, though. I think we needed a little bit of like that in this list, too. Honestly, yeah, because we haven't touched on this. There's so many sides of documentaries, triumph, failure, whatever, but we haven't really touched on like this aspect of it, and like this family kind of angle of it, which is obviously a really real thing, and documentaries, that's all they're about, is trying to touch on real things. So I love this pick, even though I've never heard of it. Howard, you have one documentary left. Ooh. As the expert. I'm leaving it to you.
Okay, so and really now it's what do I nominate this movie that I think you will a priori eliminate because it's a series and therefore waste my nomination, but do the greater good because it is a truly amazing document? Or do I go with something that will not be chosen by all of you because it's too slight, but I love it as a documentary? It's a tough decision. I'm going to go for the greater work of art, and that is the 7 Up series, or 28 Up, 35 Up, 42 up, 49 up, 56 up. I saw it first as 28 Up. And it is a documentary film series which was created in England. And the first one is called 7 Up in 1964. And it was made by a few people, but most importantly, Michael Apted, who is the person who went on to make all of them. And they basically chose, I think, about 14 British kids who were all 7 years old. Now, if we had a time machine and could go back in time and help them select the people, it might have been an even better series. But they basically, it's like 4 girls and I think 10 or 11 boys, and the majority of them are upper class, but not all of them. And some of them are going to upper class schools, but aren't upper class. And there's a couple of people of color, but it's just an incredible document because the one I saw first was 28 Up. You just see this. So they made it at 7. Sorry, it's an iterative process. They made it at 7 years old. They made it at 14 years old. They made it at 21 years old, 28 years old, 35. And they keep coming back to the same people, mostly because occasionally some of the people did not want to be in it. And they wouldn't appear in a few of them. And then they appeared again and then they didn't. And some of them just never came back. And you follow these people's lives, their ideas about who they are. And they keep going back to previous footage to show you in contrast. And it's just an absolutely incredible document. It is something that you can't do. It's like, that film Boyhood.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
Except it's Boyhood on steroids. Like it's the
real Boyhood.
It's the real Boyhood. And it deals with all sorts of social issues, class issues, race issues, gender, culture. It's just amazing, and it's a must-see, I think, for anyone who's interested in documentaries. So it may get eliminated, but based on criteria,
Well, that's the thing. Well, first of all, take that, Boyhood. You're crappy. You hear that, Ethan Hawke?
Shot.
Actually, I really like that movie. But anyways.
Yeah, of course. It's incredible.
It's a good movie.
I'm curious because this is a fascinating nomination because it is a series. But I understand that it's also made up of like individual films that make up this series. So it does feel like, I don't know. Like
each film stands on its own.
Yeah. Like, could you nominate Iron Man 2?
Well,
Yes.
nominate what? Which one are you nominating,
that's the thing,
Howard?
you'd have to
7?
I said 28.
Okay.
I said 28 up because that was the first one I saw.
I'm going to support you.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's 28 up, then I would take that. But anything else, I wouldn't.
I'm in.
Okay, 28 up.
Okay, you were describing the series in particular, right? But not 28 up.
No, I wasn't, because the reality is I didn't even watch any of these again because I didn't see the most recent one, which is 56 up, which just came out. But, each of the films stand alone because they basically are a snapshot of these people, and then they have clips of them from previous. So, but the point is that when you watch them as a series, it creates even more power. And that is why I am including it. Each of them is an amazing documentary film on their own, but it is the iterative process that is irreplaceable.
It truly is the original MCU, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Yes, it's the original MCU.
Now you're speaking my language. But
Exactly.
I'm not sure if it doesn't sound like this is the Iron Man 2 of the.
No. Is Iron Man 2 the weak link for you?
Yeah, it's
of
like the worst
MCU?
one.
Yeah.
For sure.
Better than Thor 2? Wasn't Thor 2 the worst movie?
Oh, that's true. They're both bad.
Both pretty bad.
Yeah. Anyways, but they're not.
That's another discussion.
That's a whole other one.
Five worst. You have five worst MCU.
We should do that one. Okay, well that's fantastic. We have a great list of 12. This is not where I thought.
After this, I would love to hear everyone's honorable mentions.
Yes, we will get into honorable mentions. There are people screaming at us, being like, "How could you not do the thing?"
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough to get 3.
Hey, listen, we have the hardest job here, audience.
We do have the hardest
like,
job.
think
And
about
we're pretty
us.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
It's a job only Titans can do.
That's right. So these Titans are gonna go run the Barkley Marathon on our break, and when we're back, we'll rank this list. We'll be back. Yes, reporting in from the Pod Cavern School of Business, Vinny Francois. Vinny, hello.
Hello. I'm here live at the School of Business.
The School of Business. Now, it was a normal day for you at the School of Business at Pod Cavern, but there seems to be a murder around here. That's why we have these cameras on you.
That's right. It seems a body was found. We have several police investigating the crime. Lots of blood has been found spattered in the hallways, and the mystery is afoot. And the detectives here are bound to solve it, I'm sure.
Detectives?
Yeah, we're trying to solve it, but I'm quite distracted by that fantastic outfit they're wearing.
I think it's a fashion show.
Now you can see here, these detectives are top-notch. Their genius minds are busy unraveling the mystery of Detective number 1 over here. Can you give us any information about the victim?
Yeah, it's an attractive victim, appears to be 5'5", and this shirt says Pod Cavern on it. I just think it's quite a beautiful shirt. I wish I had one of my own. Wish I knew where they come from. Really would like to pursue that rather than this crime at this point in time.
Wait a second, a Pod Cavern shirt at the Pod Cavern School of Business?
Why, that's right. We've got several people here wearing Pod Cavern outfits. We have a hoodie and several people wearing t-shirts that say Pod Cavern on them.
The same merch that if you go to podcavern.com at www.podcavern.com, buy a shirt or anything else from the merch store, a little bit of a kickback goes to the Pod Cavern, that same Pod Cavern?
Yes, that very one. All very reasonably priced and available for shipping anywhere in the world.
Do you have a mug with some writing on it? Maybe a white one?
This is far more interesting than this case. Can we pack it up and buy some Pod Cavern merch instead?
All right, we'll change the story. Now, reporting live from the merch store. A wonderful deal.
Podcavern.com.
Hello, folks. I'm Katie.
I'm Vinny.
And we host the Learn Real Good podcast.
It's a comedy podcast about science.
It's also a science podcast with comedy.
Each episode, we interview a science grad student about their research.
And we keep it casual, so you don't need to be a nerd to follow along.
We also share some of the latest science news.
I think you mean the latest science news?
Well, people need to hear more about amphibians.
I agree with that. So look us up on your favorite podcast source and
Learn Real Good. Presented by the Podcavern Network.
Close enough.
Top five.
Hello, everyone. We are back. We just did the Barkley Marathon. We hugged a grizzly bear. We did a lot of things on our break, but the thing that we want to do the most is serve you, the people at home, the very angry people at home that are saying we missed your documentary. We're sorry, okay? It's going to show up in the honorable mentions, and if it doesn't, then I guess we're extra sorry. Maybe it wasn't that good of a documentary. Howard's watched them all, okay? He's
Every one.
Yeah. Every single one of them. Except for Tread, I think, right?
Listen, if you want to get, granular, fine.
Here is the list that we have in front of us that we will be ranking into a top 5. We have Fire. We have Tread. 3 Identical Strangers. Sherman's March, The Dawn Wall, Project Grizzly, Exit Through the Gift Shop, Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, Sour Grapes, The Barkley Marathon, Last Train Home, and 28 Up. And we got to make this into a top 5 list. It is a very interesting list. There's so much missing from this list at the same time when I'm looking at it. Sure,
It's a very big genre.
Yeah, there's lots of genres are missing, but that's okay. How about we go around and I'll get you guys to star a nomination that isn't one of your own for further consideration. We'll start with you, Vinny.
I am going to pick Metallica, Some Kind of Monster for consideration. It's legit, like an incredibly entertaining, even if you actively dislike Metallica, which I believe is what Howard said he did.
Yes.
It is compelling. It is people being in a moment of, it's not like, oh, this is a vanity project. No, these people are going through it. We see them go through it. And it's all about this wild world that we cannot really fully relate to other than as just watching human beings go through a crisis in a really amazing personal way, and it's just a great doc.
Do you think it's and we'll talk about this, but maybe I'll just bring it up now. Do you think it's better that they came out with one of their worst albums after this documentary was made?
It's probably the best thing they did in that period. So.
It's not even really about the album.
No,
it's like
it's
a band struggling.
Not at all. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, the album itself is totally secondary to what they are going through.
Okay.
And there's several things that they are doing.
Okay. This continues to be very compelling to me. Katie, star one that isn't one of your own.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to star The Dawn Wall.
The Dawn Wall is starred. Howard, star one that isn't one of your own.
Last Train Home.
Last Train Home. I think it has to be Project Grizzly for me. And of course, this isn't binding. This is just like for further consideration. At this round here, we can go one more time, but now I want you to star one, even if it is one of your own. If there's a baby of yours that you're like, I really think that has a chance, or at least I want to talk about it more, now's your chance.
Does everyone always just choose one of their own? Is that just like a... Or is it uncool if I do that?
No. It's totally fine if you do it.
Okay,
If you,
okay.
yeah. So Howard, you clearly want to.
What? Me? What? Oh, okay, if you force me. Sherman's March. It's amazing.
Katie, Vinny, is there one that you are like, I really think this has a good chance of making the list?
I mean, 3 Identical Strangers is also going to be on my list. It's pretty great.
I was also going to pick it, so put 2 stars on that one.
Perfect. I'm going to just star Fire in my head. I think like the Fire Festival one. I think that one, I have a lot to say about it, I guess.
Yeah.
So the ones that are starred, I'll read them out to you. Fire, The Dawn Wall, Project Grizzly, 3 Identical Strangers, Last Train Home, Sherman's March, and Metallica, Some Kind of Monster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's a 7 star, and we'd have to cut 2. But I'm gonna bring up the other ones and make sure that we don't want to fight for them. Okay, so let's start with 28 Up. Howard, is it likely not gonna make it?
Well,
In a group top 5, of course, it's like very personal to you.
of course. I think that it is, of all of these films, the most incredible project and most incredible film, and one of the most powerful films there. So, like, I think that it's in a funky place because I think, maybe it should be in series, but the reality is that every single one of those films on their own opens up the same space. So I think it's like a fractal. It's like you can look at the small one, you can look at the whole thing, it's going to give you the same story. So I think it's amazing, but I understand that somehow maybe because it rings more powerfully as a series, maybe, but I think it's incredible.
Yeah, I second that, and I think the knock against it is that it's so individually unique and epic in its scope.
Yes.
That it almost is its own genre. Like it transcends what we're talking about as documentary film.
That to me sounds like it should be on the list.
I'm very fascinated by it. The only thing that I'm trying to think against it is if it is, I'm trying to understand that it is really good on its own, but it sounds like what really brings it together is that it is part of this bigger thing and that they've been doing this like every 7 years. And if that is not really part of this film, I mean, it kind of is because the other ones existed, but...
And they have clips from the other films.
But you appreciate it more as a full thing, right? So that's kind of where I'm trying to pick. I'm really trying to nitpick with it, obviously. It sounds amazing. But if you nominated this for docu-series, for example, I would have said, hell yes. Right. But because it's just one of them, and I'm sure it's a phenomenal one of them, like it feels like the series is more impressive than just the individual film.
Also, just as a sort of a meta statement, I knew that the one that I was going to choose would never make it, so I decided that I would hoist myself on my own petard and put 28 up in there. So I got into the discussion. If it doesn't go any further, then everyone who's listening who's never seen it knows to see it.
Absolutely, it's totally worthy of mention.
I'm happy you brought it up. How about Exit Through the Gift Shop, Katie?
I mean, we have to trim this down to 5. I mean, if that's the one of my nominees that gets left off, I'm fine with it. I mean, all of these movies, I think, are must-sees. So I'm completely fine with it being left behind for the top 5.
Okay, sounds good. Vinny, you have the Barkley Marathon and Tread that is on the cutting block. For me, I was like, Grizzly's kind of robot thing. What do I like more? Do you like Grizzly more than Tread? Because I can go either way.
I'm totally fine with Project Grizzly being my submission. I mean, all 3 of these are like pretty niche in the documentary world. They're pretty quirky. It's hard to sell all 3 of them as like universally beloved documentaries that everybody must see. I think they are, but if I had to pick one of them, it would either be Project Grizzly or the Barkley Marathons. I love Tread, but it's a wild movie. But I have such a great affection for Project Grizzly that I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay, sounds good. And for myself, like Sour Grapes is just another man who cons people, and Fire does that. Even though I feel like I just realized after I did Sour Grapes, I'm like, I guess I did have 2 movies that were like kind of a big con. I like this movie quite a lot. It introduced me into the wine world, which I had no idea about, and I still am so fascinated how that genre of people, even niche of people, even exists. And someone with such a great palette just deceiving people, like it is an interesting thing. And the guy is like an enigma. Nobody knew. He always just said like, I have a rich family, but he never talked about his family. And then you found out about his family because they were investigating him. A very fascinating story, but I do think Fire seems a little bit more universal, I guess. And I think that makes it a little bit more appealing for the masses, and it certainly did for me too. So I think I'd rather at least put that in my hat. So I'm going to read the list one more time that is starred. And now we're going to do something called locks, and we're going to see if we can narrow this down even more. How locks works is I'll say the nomination, you say if it's a lock or not. If it's unanimous, then it's going to make the top 5 probably. Whoa. Locks are not binding, but it's a way for us to navigate the list. If people are like, I don't know, I'm not sure, like I need to hear more about it, then just say no lock. We'll talk about it. We're just going to move on from it. Sound good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Fire, lock or no lock? No lock. Okay,
no
everyone
lock.
see?
No lock.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. Dawn Wall, lock or no lock? That's a lock for me.
Lock.
It's close.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
close.
it's okay.
It's close.
Okay.
It's close.
Project Grizzly, lock or no lock?
Lock for me.
No lock.
Oh, this is gonna be hard.
I really like Project Grizzly, but I'm gonna say let's duke it out.
Three Identical Strangers, lock or no lock?
Lock.
I'm gonna say no lock. I like it a lot.
I like it a lot too. I'll also say no lock.
Okay. Last Train Home, lock or no lock?
Lock, which is like crazy because I haven't seen it, but
Wow.
Katie really sold it to me. I feel like I know exactly what this movie is, and I definitely want to watch it.
Spoiled it.
I haven't seen it, so I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lock.
Okay. Sherman's March, lock or no lock? This to me is a lock for in my head. You sold it very well to me, Howard.
Yeah, it's a lock for me. It's hard because if you haven't seen it, that's this subject. As you said early on, this subject is a tough one.
Yeah.
But because if you haven't seen it, but it's
Yes.
incredible.
I think at this point we just kind of go off everyone's passion for it, and if they feel that strongly about it, you kind of cave into it. That's why I'm locking Sherman's March, because it does feel like such a unique documentary because it's not really about the thing that it was supposed to be, which is hilarious to me. But is there no lock coming from you, Katie and Vinny?
I want to hear more about it, but I want to see it.
I
So
definitely
is
want
there
to
some-
see
is
it.
there-
I have a hard time locking something I
Yeah,
haven't
that's
seen.
exactly. I
That's
haven't seen it.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. And last
Let's
but not
talk about
least, Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, lock or no lock?
Lock it.
Lock.
I have not seen it, but I will. I want a music thing on here, so I want to lock it. Okay. So we did get one lock on the list. Great. Fantastic. We need 4 more on this list.
I'm going to suggest that we jettison one film, which I think really, and this is where we hurt each other's feelings, right? Is Fire, which I think is a great documentary. Great documentary.
Hurt me,
There's
Howard.
No, it's just the flavor of the month. It's a documentary that happened recently, so it has some kind of like a little bit of interest, and we understand it because it's zeitgeisty. But I don't think it's the story that has legs, and the actual documentary of it was kind of stock and generic. Like the actual form of it was
Sure.
as a generic. So that's
I could see that.
I'm gonna second that because I think it's a really good doc. It's a worthy watch. But of the movies that I have seen on this list, it's not in the same class.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think the reason why I brought it up is, it is mainstream in that way. I mean, it's from 2019, so it's not like that new. I mean, I guess in the grand scope of things, it's newer. I wonder how it'll stand up to the test of time. It does feel like a singular moment, I guess, in time, and I wonder how that singular moment will hold up later.
I mean, Tread is from 2019, and it's timeless.
Okay, I'm okay with Fire dropping. If I were to nominate a documentary for just anybody to watch that like hasn't watched that many documentaries and just needs something that's like easy, I feel like the Fire documentary is very easy to watch. I guess.
If you've never watched a documentary before, that's a good entry point.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to cut it. So Dawnwall, Project Grizzly, Three Identical Strangers, Last Train Home, Sherman's March. We actually only have to cut one of those.
Oh, wow. Do you want to go around,
Yeah.
instead of vouching for the ones we love, say which one we'd cut, or how are we going to do this?
I'll say the 2 that I would cut are the 2 that I haven't seen are Last Train Home and Sermons, which I both
Wow.
I want to watch them both pretty badly.
Heartless.
Like I'm into it, but I have no sentiment towards either of them. They both sound great, but I'd be fine with cutting either of them.
But it sounds. But should we cut it as a group because you haven't seen it? Because I don't know.
I'm just
if
giving
that's-
my
No,
vote.
he's
Okay.
giving his feelings.
Okay.
Katie, what is the ones in your mind that are like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the criteria I'm sort of using in my mind is like, is there something cinematic or story-wise about this that tells something about the human condition and sort of affects you in a way? Just from its beauty or its emotion or its surprise or the quality of story. That's sort of what I'm using. Like, what do people need to see, right? Because these are all great, but we have to make it to 5. So I'm sorry. And this is not out of retribution, Vinny, but Project Grizzly, I don't think people need to see that. Again, it's sad. It's these men who need therapy, and instead they build these projects. I don't know that is fundamentally changing.
I think it's has as much insight into the human condition as Sherman's March and Last Train Home
That you haven't seen.
that I haven't seen. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's from what I'm hearing.
Okay,
I don't see
so
I don't
here-
see the distinction.
so let me make the
and it's a freaking great watch.
Let me make the distinction. Because I've seen both Sherman's March and
Sure.
Grizzly Project. What I think is distinctive about Sherman's March and different than I think everything else on this list is that the actual form of the film, it's about documentary film. As much as it's telling a story, as much as it's showing you interesting things, as much as it's making you laugh and making you shudder, it is also a comment about what is documentary film, both in how he creates it and also in the fact it's a sleight of hand, because he's telling you it's about one thing and it's really about something else.
Sure.
And Project Grizzly, again, like, I think it is more of a sort of robust documentary in its form than Fire, for example. But it's still just kind of, here's a story I want to tell you about this crazy guy.
I think it's about more than that. I think it's about people who are driven by something. And there's something about that I think is universal. And all you've done, Howard, is make me want to cut Last Train Home.
Okay, so can I come back to it? May I make a case?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yes, this is what this is for, this section.
So, again, for the things I value a documentary for visual spectacle, for a good story, for being about the basic human condition, I don't know that there's a better film on this list than Last Train Home, which I did not make, but I sound like I did. It's about something that's so foreign to me, happening at the other part of the world, affecting 130 million people. But again, they address it by looking at a single family. And anyone who is ever a rebellious teen and knows what it feels like to have your parents trying to hoist on their will to you and how oppressive that feels, and you want to run away from it. And then to now be, the three of us in this room, parents on the other side of that, and how desperately you want to help your kid. I think it's an absolute must-watch and very universal. Not everyone is a crazy person who builds something instead of taking care of their mental illness. I think everyone has been a kid. A lot of people have been a parent. And it just sort of shows the effects of this industry that everyone with an iPhone here adds to, but shows sort of the cost of sort of wanting to give your kids the dreams you couldn't have. How that affects a family, having to give up a relationship with your kids for your whole life.
Sounds like that family needs therapy.
I think there is something about this sort of massive number of people that is such a powerful thing. It's like, because built into it is like how many other stories are happening in those 130,000 people, like
million.
And the fact that it's not very dialogue based and it's not very talky probably just adds to that sort of like huge mass of people feeling where they're all going through this. And so I do feel comfortable supporting that film.
Thank you, Howard.
You make a really good case for this, Katie. I want to revisit this afterwards because I can see that this movie, when someone feels like this strongly about a thing, it really adds an extra something to the nomination to me. Like, if this is the movie that resonates the most with you, this is the first nomination that you thought of when this topic came up. I assume Sherman's March was the same way for you, Howard.
Yes.
That gives it points in my head that this is just something that resonates really hard with you. So that is something to keep in consideration when we do these things. And this is the point of the discussion where I have to remind people that all of these movies are good. Please watch them all. We're just arguing because we have to. That's what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
With that said, I want to hear about Three Identical Strangers, because it's kind of like you made a case for it already, but obviously your passion for Last Train Home is even stronger than that. Do you think Three Identical Strangers also needs to be on this list, Katie? Is kind of my question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a few of us have seen this one. I guess my argument for why this one is more than just, and it's a crazy story. It's the sort of story where you'd be like, that's the craziest story I've ever heard. It sounds stranger than fiction that these people would find each other this way, and how similar they are is really sort of striking. But again, there's a bigger story here about that they're part of an experiment they didn't consent to. They never found out what the research was. It's under lock until I think 2060 something. So these people who were part of the study they never consented to won't even know what the outcomes were. But even without the scientific side of things, these twins and triplets finding each other, you see the sort of heartbreaking realities of the consequences of this. That, you know, they were, even though they didn't know they were even a twin, there was a part of them missing their whole lives. A lot of them were rebellious teenagers. A lot of them were depressed. They didn't know why. And you find out it's because their whole life they were pulled apart from their family. So again, it has that sort of universal family tie that we all know what it's like to sort of lose someone. And the idea to sort of lose someone you didn't even know you lost can still affect you, even though you don't even know there's something missing. I think that's sort of important.
I really liked Three Identical Strangers. I don't think I would put it on my list of like best documentaries ever, but it's very, very compelling. And what it has that I think is pretty special and that only documentaries can do is the powerful thing about the story is that it actually did happen. So, for example, like one of the documentaries I was thinking about putting on the list is called Man on Wire. And it, you know, like it was very close for me. And what the power of that story is that someone actually did that thing. And, you know, like it's that all sort of falls into your category of films. It's just like Vinny. I'm looking at Vinny, sorry. Because like, it's just so incredible that these maniacs actually dedicated their lives to these projects, right? And so Man on Wire, which is about the guy who actually shot a crossbow across the Twin Towers and walked back and forth on it, you know, like
Joseph Gordon-Levitt did it.
Well, exactly. But that's actually the point that I was trying to make about Three Identical Strangers is that like the fact that that movie exists with Joseph Gordon-Levitt actually somehow tarnishes the doc. Because like the stories, it makes it less incredible because it could be a movie. Whereas Three Identical Strangers, that story is just so incredible because you're just stuck in that moment where the one guy is like being called that name by the other guy, and then they rush to a phone and they're calling. Like I'm just getting goosebumps just thinking about that moment because it really happened. You know, it's powerful.
Yeah.
Oh, this is tough, guys. We still have to cut one. Maybe when we look at this list, we try to we like variety on our list, obviously. So if you can start seeing too many similarities between movies, then maybe that's where we start kind of parsing them out a little bit. The thing is, like, a lot of these movies are very different from one another, I think. So it might be tough to do. We didn't talk about Donwall.
We haven't talked Donwall, yeah.
So we can bring that up right now. I really think we need Donwall on this list. I think it's such a triumph. I also like a sports documentary. We don't have that on this list. So that in and of itself is already a big win for it. And it's also my favorite rock climbing documentary. Like I just think there's
I'm going to say this. It's also the best looking documentary of any of the ones that we've got. It looks amazing. It's a beautiful. If I could watch it with the sound off,
right. I'm down for locking Donwall. I was sort of down for locking it initially, anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Donwall is a great representative for sports. Basically, one man striving for something that seems to be impossible against the odds and being beautiful.
It's also beautiful to. I'm going to talk about it for a second here. Is that he could have done it by himself. But he was going through such a depressive period after his divorce that he was the one. He's like, I'm going to go do this impossible. I'm going to create the Donwall route, basically. But I want to do it with somebody. And when his buddy Kevin, he's the guy, his second partner, he was stuck on that horizontal part for like a long time. Yeah. And Tommy kept going without him for a while and then got to this point where he was just like, this is amazing, but I really don't want to go to the top without, like, it means nothing if I don't get to have my partner. So he climbs back down and waits and supports the other guy for like a week straight and 8 days, like something crazy. Yeah. And then it's just like, as soon as you do it, then we're going up together. And you think about that, it's just like, this is this guy's dream and he's putting it on hold for this other guy who he kind of roped into like becoming this part of his dream too. And just like the idea of living on the cliffside, like that is crazy to me. Like when they're showing footage of like, this is how we take a shit. And I'm like, what? Like it's so dangerous. Like you're literally pooping off the side of a thing where like you could fall off. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, that's so cute. You could fall off. Like that's what the
whole movie.
Thing. Yeah, it's the whole thing. You could fall off.
That was the subtitle.
Colon.
You could fall off. You could fall off. Yeah. I love it. I think Donwall has to stray.
I agree.
For the sake of moving on, if one of the people who have two nominees have to dump one, I'm okay with dumping Three Identical Strangers if that has to go. Otherwise, the one I feel least strongly about on this list is Project Grizzly.
Yeah, to me, like for me, it's between, in terms of dumping, if we're going to get back to the Donwall and
of course.
Yes. Dumping, it's between Project Grizzly. Both of them are great. I love them both, but Project Grizzly and Three Identical Strangers, just because they're not awesome. They're not awesome to me. They're not awe-inspiring. And I think like Donwall is awe-inspiring. Last Train Home definitely sounds awe-inspiring. Sherman's March to me is awe-inspiring. And Metallica is not awe-inspiring. It's just so good. And so to me, those two, they're great. But there's something...
They're just not in the same class?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. They're smaller.
I think I need to hear, and we can move on, of course, after this, but I need to hear, Vinny, your real argument for Project Grizzly before I make my decision here. Lay it on the table why this belongs.
I think, one, it's certainly the most, of the ones that we've got, it's the most entertaining, like, funnest documentary to watch of all of these. It is the most, I'm going to say it's small in the best way. It makes it the most human of these, in that it's just like it's the most relatable of all of these. And I think it's the showcase of one person's folly as an exploration of different aspect of what it means to be human.
Katie, Howard, does that do anything for you?
I mean, for the sake of moving on, I'm fine with keeping Project Grizzly in here. Again, it's hard to comment when you haven't seen it. But to me, it still seems like such a small story that I don't think I can relate to as a biologist who loves bears. But
I mean, ask me again after I've seen all these movies. There's a good chance I'll go to bat for another one of these films.
Yeah, to me, it was still Three Identical Strangers and Project Grizzly, and I'm okay with either or, so... Howard?
And I'm fine if it's Project Grizzly. But I'm gonna go to bat for it because I do love that.
Of course.
Yeah. Is there any? What about the idea that Vinny is like putting up a brave face and he's gonna cry because
no. If everybody, I have my one vote. You all have one each as well.
Tuong and Howard have to decide because obviously me and Vinny are gonna keep the ones that we already love.
Okay, what do you say, Tuong? What are you thinking?
Sidebar.
They can't hear us now.
Harry, come in the corner for me.
Yeah, okay,
1 second. Okay. All right. There he is. They can't hear us.
Dude, can fighting squabbling partners much?
Yeah, I know. Seriously, this is so awkward. Why do we invite a couple to the podcast? This is
like we're gonna decide, who wins between these two people, as if it's really up to us.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And we're going to be the cause of their big fight after the podcast. So we have to drag this out. Otherwise, they'll fight.
Dude, that's totally true. If we never make a decision. No. Okay. What are you thinking?
Okay. If we're going for quirkiness, the reason why Project Grizzly is appealing is because it's quirky, and I like having a quirky doc on here. Yeah. That's why I think it is appealing. Three Identical Strangers, I go to what you said, Howard, where it is something that can kind of only be a documentary. Like it seems like such a... I don't know. Like I don't know how else to capture this story other than this format.
It's so outlandish that if you made it into a fiction story, it loses the greatest appeal of it. Because you could just come up with any idea.
So to me, what is more appealing between the two with those two arguments? And that's where I'm struggling.
Okay, well, so my one thing to say, though, is that like Sherman's March is incredibly quirky. Again, I sort of feel like this is stupid because no one's seen it. But like it is you watch it, you're going to be like, this guy's just a lunatic. Okay. So if we're looking for that, I think that is the case.
If that checks that box, then I can lose Project Grizzly.
Okay. I'll lose Project Grizzly too.
Is that where you're leaning in the first place, Howard?
I think so. Look, I brought Project Grizzly up to Vinny when he was telling the story about the other film. Like, I think Project Grizzly is an incredible story. The guy is just a real maniac. And a sweet maniac,
yes,
which is endearing. But I think that the story of the Three Identical Strangers is chilling. It's incredible that it happened, and it does touch upon the sort of idea of nature versus nurture and genetics and responsibility and morality and science and stuff. There's a lot there.
Okay, let's do it. Sorry, Vinny.
All good.
Tears are shed. Howard. We caused this. We caused this rift between.
We did. You know what?
It's really awkward in this room.
You know what? They're just going to have to learn to live with it. That's just the way it is. And they'll grow and they'll develop, and their relationship will deepen. And we're going to giving them this gift.
You know what's going to happen is right after this recording, Vinny's going to make some contraption to deal with the grief
incident,
and I'll film it.
Yeah,
great. This is the beginning of Vinny's documentary.
This is my origin story.
Okay, I'm going to read what we have for the 5. The Dawn Wall. We have Three Identical Strangers, Last Train Home, Sherman's March, Metallica, Some Kind of Monster. That's 5. Let's start from number 5 and work our way to the number 1. What's number 5?
The one that was on the chopping block.
Yeah,
it has to be Three Identical Strangers.
That seems
I think
fair.
so too. Three Identical Strangers. Number 4, again, we have The Dawn Wall, we have Last Train Home, Sherman's March, and Metallica. Where's everyone thinking?
Purely because it's the only one I haven't seen, but he makes it sound so good, would be Sherman's March.
I'm tied. Last Train Home and Sherman's are both in the same bucket for me.
Yeah, same here. I can go either or on those to.
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard subject to really get so locked down on. I think it's reasonable. I think they're both kind of unique films,
Yeah.
so I think that it's fine whichever order it is. To be honest, I know that goes against the whole point of this. But if you want, I'm like, no, Sherman's March is obviously should be.
No.
At this stage of the game and comparing apples and oranges, so
100%.
it's a bit of an arbitrary exercise. But for me, Last Train Home and Sherman's March are 3-4. I don't care which order.
I'm trying to think. I feel like Last Train Home has more to say. Maybe that's wrong, but it feels like it has more to say. But Sherman's March might be more entertaining and easier to watch for me. Like, I think if I were to, like, which one to pick right now, I'm going to put it on. I think I put Sherman's March on before.
Let me just tell you one thing. If you want to look up Rotten Tomatoes score for Sherman's March, you're going to have 3 digits to space because it's 100%.
Okay.
Katie, how you feeling?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I mean, it's comparing one of my favorite movies of all time to something I haven't seen. So I think we know how I feel about that, but I'm happy to go with the group.
Sherman's March on 4 it is.
Okay. Let's give Vinny what he wants. He deserves it.
Yeah. Whatever you just do whatever you. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, buddy. There you go.
Oh, Candy, thank you.
I'm going to say Last Train Home as number 3, I think.
Sure.
And I'm completely fine however this
This is
going to
be tough.
Obviously, I'm biased between the Dawn Wall because I think it's incredible. I really do. It's just such an amazing story that is, you really get to learn about the two people climbing it and their struggle. And when they finally climb it, you feel empowered and you're like, can I climb it? Probably not. I got really into rock climbing during, I guess, like before the pandemic, but even like during, like I was doing a lot of it. So I was like, it made me appreciate the sport so much more because when I see like really good people at the rock climbing gym, I'm like, these guys are monsters. But then you compare them to these titans, the people at the rock climbing gym are nothing. Like these guys are like legendary.
They're superhuman.
It's
Would you say there's some kind of monster?
I would say monsters, but we already... But that said, the Metallica one sounds really fun. So I'm going to have to defer to the people who've seen both, I guess. And I'll probably have to go that way.
That's a tough
They're
one.
so different. They're both complete must-sees.
Yeah.
The thing with the Metallica Some Kind of Monsters, I gotta say, is that it's not what you're gonna think it is, right? You picture like one of the biggest bands of modern history. You expect them to be these egomaniacs who are maybe, know who they are and have confidence and know what they're doing. And it's just, they're totally in shambles and they're falling apart and with addiction issues, people quitting. The therapist side story, you can't even, again, it's insane. Like he gets so co-dependent on them. He thinks he's part of the band. It's like, you don't know where it's going. It's full of twists and turns, and you don't have to like Metallica to find it such a great spectacle.
By the way, I am for sure team therapist. Like, I actually understand. I feel like I understand what he's doing there. I don't think that he's lost perspective on it. He is being present.
When he starts contributing lyrics,
that's a mistake.
That's what, because he loses perspective.
No, I think
on his
I don't think he's deluded. I think he makes a mistake. And that's part of what he says.
Interesting.
He's like, look, he's asking of them to be honest and present, and he's trying to be honest and present. And like, I think
that's an interesting take on it.
Anyway, whatever. But the fact that we can have this conversation,
that's kind of like what I'm gathering from this short little thing that you guys just did just now, which I have no idea what you're talking about in many ways. But I like the idea of this documentary about this band where you have a lot of assumptions going in already. Metallica, Some Kind of Monster. I'm filling in the blanks of what this documentary is, but when you guys are describing what it is not what I'm thinking. So there's a little bit of like a swerve in expectation. It does sound like it's ripe for discussion afterwards and what some pieces of it means, where like ultimately the Dawn Wall, you know where it's gonna head. Like, they're going to climb it. If it didn't, it'd be a terrible documentary. So I'd like the happiness that comes from the Dawn Wall. Like, I feel really proud. It's like, oh, it's cool that humans exist that can do this thing. So it makes me, like, impressed. But Metallica seems maybe a little bit more interesting. I don't know.
Here's where I'm going to. I held my tongue when we were first. I think Dawn Wall should absolutely be in the top 5, but this is a celebration of idiotic behavior. When both Free Solo and the Dawn Wall, watching it, I'm just saying like, fuck you. Like there are people who are going to die because they watch this documentary. The death rate of people doing this kind of behavior is high. It's like, it is something you're applauding because it's like the pinnacle of human achievement, except it's as dumb as the Project Grizzly dude. If my child watched the Dawn Wall and then said, you know what, I want a Free Solo, I'm going to go do that, I'd be like, oh my God, what a terrible thing. I wish that movie never existed.
You think it's irresponsible to make
It's not irresponsible to make the movie because we should document. It's a there's tons of documentaries about things that are terrible, but like, if I'm going to put this up as one of the top 5 documentaries, no, because it's an incredible thing and I'm supporting it being on the list. But number 1, for the same reason I didn't choose a Holocaust documentary, it just doesn't need to be in the top 5. You know?
I am going to go to bat again for Dawn Wall because documentaries are documents, but they're also movies, and I'm going to go to bat for its visuals once again. I think underestimating Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, it probably could have been an audio podcast, an audio series, and it would lose maybe 10-20% of its impact. Dawn Wall as an audio series would lose 50-80% of its impact. And so as a movie, it is a far superior movie than Metallica. And I don't know about documentary, but it is a far superior movie to Metallica.
I would also, even though I did argue, because I just wanted to talk about Some Kind of Monster some more, I would argue Dawn Wall first because it covers something else that we haven't talked about at all, and that is nature documentaries. Just the spectacular footage of this area. And again, it's about one person striving for something that seems impossible. Everyone tells them not to do it. And while I agree that I don't want my kids climbing mountains because of this guy, I think the idea of you having this sort of drive to do something in spite of all this history that he has and other people telling him it's impossible, doing it just to do it, I think is important. A good message.
Yeah. I'm not a parent.
Hold on, before you decide, before you decide, Tom, you're not a parent.
I'm going to start with that.
Before you decide, I was holding one piece of nugget, nugget.
An ace, yeah.
And it's time for me to release it.
Okay.
So 2/3 of the way through the movie, Some Kind of Monster, Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, they hire their new bassist. Okay? They're trying out different guys and they hire him. And they sit down at a table with him and they say, we would like to hire you as the bassist. And part of the deal that they give him is just $1 million. Just not like in the future. It's like, here, we're just to start off $1 million. Because, why? Because if he's going to live with them, he has to have at least $1 million. Because that's the world that they're living in. That like just baseline, like spending, he needs $1 million spending money.
Walking around money.
That's the world that's being documented here. It's an extremely strange, fascinating world that is like, unique. And it's a unique moment. It's a unique moment in time. So that's the last thing I can tell you to try to sway you to.
It's a good sway. If you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, the Dawn Wall has 3 digits on it, where, Metallica has 2. So, I mean, what are we even talking about here? I'm going to 100% watch Metallica. I've only seen the Dawn Wall. So, of course, we're only fighting for the thing that we've seen at this point.
Of course.
I think rock climbing is an incredible thing. And I definitely hear what you're saying about what you just said, Howard, about rock climbing and stuff. I don't entirely agree with that sentiment because people are wired differently, which is what makes humans like very interesting creatures. But I do I don't, because I'm not a parent, which is why I said that. Like the idea that you don't want your children to go through that or like to be, reckless in that way. But it reminds me of like when my mother says, don't cross the street. And I say, I'm going to cross the street. Like, I know they're completely different things, but there's a level of like, don't go surfing, don't do parachuting, and then eventually don't go rock climbing. Free soloing, there's only 1% of the community that does free soloing, and I would never do that. But it is interesting, the people that, like, hearing in that particular documentary, the main guy, Alex, was talking about how there's free soloing is an insane thing, and some people might assume that people do it because they have nothing to live for, when in fact this is all they live for, is that they need this experience because it like feeds their brain, and people get fed that dopamine in so many different ways that this is how they do it. And to us that don't do that sport, it is very dangerous, but to them it is just life, and if they didn't have it, they'd be very sad. So that's why the Dawn Wall is interesting to me as well, because this is just their life. They like to climb same way we like to do our like regular type, like you guys, our parents, they like to climb, that kind of thing. Anyways, I'm gonna go with Dawn Wall. I think that's where I'm done.
I've seen both these movies. They're both excellent. It's a tough one too, but I'm gonna go with Dawn Wall.
Literally same as Vinny.
Okay.
Great.
Wow. What a discussion. Here we go. Number 5, Three Identical Strangers. Number 4, Sherman's March. Number 3, Last Train Home. Number 2, Metallica, Some Kind of Monster. And number 1, The Dawn Wall. Hopefully, because Howard, if you gave me $1 million to like sway the argument, then maybe I would change my mind, but you didn't do it at any point.
No.
You don't have Metallica walking around right now.
I'm gonna. You know what? I could give you $1 million. I'm that much of a badass, but I will not.
Flex.
Okay, seems spiteful. Okay, all right. All right, now we're going into honorable mentions. I like this. What an incredible list, I have to say. I think we did a really good job, and I think it's a much different list than... That's the thing about documentary films. So once again, all the lists out there are completely different.
Yeah.
Where if you look up top 5 candy, for example... It's the same 5 candy. These documentaries that we listed today might not even be in the top 100 of someone's list, right? That's how big of a scope this topic is. And it's kind of, maybe we should have separated in different genres, to be honest with you, now that I thought about it. But let's go into honorable mentions. I'm going to start with Howard. Can you rapid fire all of your honorable mentions?
The best, my number 1 sports documentary, When We Were Kings. Pina by Wim Wenders, which is an incredible documentary. Man on Wire, The Thin Blue Line, Pumping Iron, The Weather Underground, My Octopus Teacher, Shoah, Koyaanisqatsi, Hearts of Darkness, Genghis Blues, Anvil, which I just put on the list. And then for my music documentaries, that's the hard one. Don't Look Back, Stop Making Sense, The Last Waltz, Sugar Man.
Yes.
The movie that is in my mind always linked to Three Identical Strangers, Capturing the Friedmans.
Oh, yes. That was on.
And then the most bizarre, Act of Killing.
Oh, yes.
Katie, all of your honorable mentions.
Oh my gosh. Dear Zachary, Bowling for Columbine, Wrestling with Shadows, Pumping Iron, Paris is Burning, Blackfish, Food Inc., 20 Feet from Stardom, Jiro Dreams of Sushi, and Inconvenient Truth, Central Park 5, Tig 13th, March of the Penguins, The Rescue, and Senna.
Vinny.
Yeah, some of these have been mentioned already. Jiro Dreams of Sushi, Free Solo Dawn Wall, The Rescue, The Perfect Bid, The King of Kong, Icarus, Spellbound, and Word Wars.
Oh.
Okay, here's mine. Super Size Me. It's a classic. Bowling for Columbine. That was going to be my 3rd nomination.
Yeah, me too.
That was
That's
my first.
I switched.
I only watched it today for the first time. That's why I was like, I'm going to do it. Yeah, I know.
That would have made top 5.
Yeah, for sure.
I know.
We've all been like,
I know.
okay, yeah, how are we not going to put that?
Instead, I chose the wine one for the last minute
all
chance.
3 of mine, I'm like, no one's going to pick mine, but I'm good
Yes,
with it.
we often go with our heart sometimes, and that's often the wrong decision, but feels right in the time.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, me too. 13th, The Dawn Wall, Free Solo, Sarah Graves, Fog of War,
Yes.
Icarus.
I mean, Errol Morris has 3.
Yeah.
We've honorable mentions. We've mentioned 3 different Errol Morris films.
Yes.
Let's see. Yeah, I had Man on Wire, Won't You Be My Neighbor, Searching for Sugar Man, and the one that was the series that like I said, I only had a week to really watch these things, and I burned like 3 of my days, 3.5 of my days on this series / movie that I didn't even fucking nominate. So I'm kind of like, I'm gonna watch more. It was OJ Made in America.
Oh
yeah.
That was on my series list.
a good one.
It's
So,
incredible.
The thing is, like, that's why I was arguing for it in the chat a little bit, because it's technically a movie. Like, it won the Oscar for movie because it went to theatrical release as an 8-hour film. But if you watch it on Disney Plus, they split it into 5 parts. So it's like one of those things that technically technically would make it, but
Yeah, but if
it's
that, then I can put Get Back on the list, which would be number 1.
fair.
Yes, in this room for sure.
But sounds like from this list we should have done Bowling for Columbine. Anyways, Michael Moore's best. That's my hot take. And
sure.
I also had King of Kong as well because that's just silly.
But
It's fun.
Yeah, it's really especially I think for certain people of a certain age.
Yes, sure. And that's our list of documentaries today. Wow, we did it. Again, I'm shocked we didn't have like a murder mystery, a political charged one, a true crime. Like any of those did not make the list, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
Thin
rock
Blue
climbing
Line was very close for me, and that is like the true crime king of all. That's the original, like introduced recreations, and then of course has at the end of the documentary, spoiler alert, just a camera on the tape as it spins, and the guy who actually did the murder basically admitting that he did
the
the
Jinx.
murder. No.
Oh.
This is
Thin Blue Line.
Thin Blue Line, which is like before the original.
Yeah, before
Yeah, a
the
lot of
Jinx did that. Yeah.
A lot of the true crimes tend to be series, and I loved true crime, but they were all series. Dear Zachary, which I mentioned, is a true crime, but a terribly made doc, which is why I didn't make my top 3.
That's a shame.
But a great story.
All right. Well, that's our episode on documentary films. We couldn't have done this without these documentary nerds that we have here in the Pod Cavern. Vinny, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
This was so much fun. I think we argued way more about this than we ever did about horses.
I know a lot more about this than I do about horses.
Yeah. I still tell people about who won our horses episode, and they're like, "What, dude?" And
Who won?
Black Stallion? What?
Black Stallion.
Yeah. Howard, that face is usually the
reaction. Yeah.
the reaction.
It's a famous horse.
Well, I know that I know the horse that should have won. So, and I'm very
Personally.
confident. I'm very confident it's not on the list.
What is it?
Oh, well,
Equus, son of Nequus, son of Fleckus the Great.
I don't know that one.
that's from the play.
The play Equus, which is
I think it got brought up.
Yeah, I think so.
Did it?
It was an honorable mention.
Anyways, not about horses today. It's about being, being on the podcast. Do you have anything to plug for the people at home?
Yeah, I do. So I run Improv College, which is an online improv school, and every year we recruit people to come join part of our teams and be part of an improv community. And if people want to study in a 10-month program, improvised narrative, improvised drama, a whole bunch of different formats, check out improvcollege.ca around the August time. But also year-round, we have individual classes, 4-week classes with teachers from around the world who are like world-class. So we're regularly offering classes at improvcollege.ca. Check it out.
Incredible. Yes, please check it out. It is an awesome, awesome place. Katie, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was such a thrill.
Now, I am a little disappointed, even though it would have been violent, but I didn't get babe-alladied once during the show. And
You were vouching for my pick, so I was just
It's
ready
true.
to, press AABB up and turn you into a baby, but
Right. And I'm surprised you didn't do it on Vinny when he shout talked your nomination.
it'll be off screen.
Yeah, I'm getting
okay.
animality.
Katie, what do you have to plug for the people at home?
Yeah, well, Vinny and I co-host a podcast, Learn Real Good, on the Pod Cavern Podcast Network, which is a silly take on science where we interview grad students and have silly, goofy conversations about what it's like to do research. And you should check it out. Learn Real Good.
Yes, please do it. It is also a phenomenal show. Howard, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
Yeah, it was so much fun to talk to you. I was nervous because you said you watched 1 million documentaries, so I didn't know what to expect. But I am now coming out of it needing to watch Sherman's March. So you've done a great service for the people.
Thank you. That's my only reason for coming on was to spread the gospel of Sherman's March.
So if that didn't make the list, you would never come back, is what you're saying.
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. Okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to plug for the people at home?
Sure. I mean, I produced 75 podcasts of my podcast, Gateway Music Podcast, and it's a music documentary. It's a music podcast, basically where every episode I interview someone about what made them passionate about music. And so we talk about sometimes albums or concerts or technologies. We talk about people or instruments. And it's really a blast. Both Katie and Vinny were guests on the show. And I stopped doing it during the pandemic when I started running out of patience for being alone in a room in front of a screen. And I hope to restart it again sometime soon, but I'm enjoying trying to live a normal life right now.
It's a great show.
I hope it comes back because I would love to be on it.
I would love to have you.
Talk about my secret Metallica passion that you don't know. Yeah, I was a fan all along. Show my Metallica tattoo. And for me, you can find the rest of the shows in the Pod Cavern at www.podcavern.com. Check out all the shows in the network. A lot of exciting things to come with the network, but I'll keep that under wraps for now. So stay tuned. Until then, that's it for today's episode. So let's go see our therapist, gets $1 million, and we'll see you on another episode of Ranked. Bye, everyone.